VOWR800.
Hello, my name is Deborah Collins. Welcome to Going Strong, the radio show that celebrates the rich history and culture of Newfoundland and Labrador and the people who explore it and keep it going strong. We're a nation of storytellers, and we have a 500-year-old treasury of tales to tell. This is Love Our Local Authors Month, and our writers are among the finest in the world, whose works speak volumes about this place and its people. My guest today is one of Newfoundland's newest authors, but who already has 3 children's books under her belt, inspired by our land and sky. Luanne Langdon, welcome.
Thank you, Deborah. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, you know something? It's good to have you. 3 books published in less than 2 years. For a new writer, you're off to a mighty strong start.
Well, thank you.
We're going to talk about the true stories that inspired your first 2 books in a minute, but let's find out a little bit about you. Writing is your second career. What did you do before that?
I am a retired teacher. I taught for 30 years in Newfoundland and Labrador, mostly on the Avalon, but also throughout the island and also in Labrador. So up until this point, though, most of my writing has been confined to report cards.
You broke out from the report cards.
Yes. And during the last 15 years of my teaching career, I was also the teacher librarian in the school where I worked.
So a very natural transition, it seems.
Yes.
Yeah. And your love of communicating with children obviously began a few decades ago. And was it a natural transition into writing children's books?
Yes, I would say it is. I have always loved reading, loved books. I'm from a family of readers. Both of my parents were great readers. Even my grandparents read. In our household, we had lots of books. Since my father was a minister, we had lots of spiritual reading materials. But we also had storybooks, we had picture books, and we had magazines. I remember having Time and Maclean's and National Geographic. So there was a lot of reading material available to me.
How does it feel to be one of the newest recruits in our nation of storytellers? You know, was it something you always wanted to do and now just felt like the right time?
No. As a matter of fact, it had never entered in my mind to become a writer. It's just something that actually happened. There wasn't anything specific other than an experience a few years ago on a cruise ship with my sisters. We were on a boat, and my sister, who is a news junkie, was reading the news on her phone, and she read about an incident that had happened here in Newfoundland. And she turned to me and said, "Do you know about that? You should write about it."
And this was in 2018, and she was talking about the real-life rescue of a dolphin named Dolly, who became trapped near Heart's Delight, a dramatic story that gripped the attention of a lot of people. What was it about that event that resonated with you once your sister suggested it to you?
Well, actually, when she was reading about it, Dolly did not have a name. We named Dolly. She said, "You should write a children's story about it." The reason she had suggested the story was because I had just previously written a story about her cats for her children. So she knew that I had been writing stories
For children.
for children about animals.
Okay.
Because I've always been a keen animal person. She actually came up with the name Dolly. She said, "You should write the story from the point of view of a dolphin in that pod." And I think I just mentioned, I've always loved animals. Animals are my favorite people. So the story of a successful rescue of animals really appealed to me. So I thought about it for a bit, and then I researched it, and I just sat down and I wrote up the story. But it appealed to me because it was a successful rescue. And I've always loved happy endings.
Yes. So clarify for me, you named the dolphin Dolly? That wasn't the name given by the people?
Oh, no, absolutely not. She said,
amazing. I
she
didn't
said you
realize
should
that.
call it Dolly. Tell it from the point of view of Dolly. Dolly the dolphin. So that's what we went with.
Yeah, well, it makes perfect sense, and a beautiful story, and beautifully illustrated by Newfoundland-born artist Don Short. And of course, a story tailor-made for children. Do you feel that you're still teaching children in a way?
In a way, yes. although I would want my books to be more than just an instructional tool. I want children to enjoy reading them, and I want adults to enjoy reading them, because I still love reading children's stories, and I believe other adults do as well. But because of my background as a teacher, I think I tend to put a little bit more information into my books, because I do remember in teaching, especially in the elementary grades, that some children in particular are not as much into stories as into the factual information that they can get from reading. So they like the nonfiction books as opposed to the storybooks. Yeah. So I try to include that in as many books as I can.
Based on real life stories.
Based on real life stories.
Yeah, and there's no shortage in Newfoundland for sure. And maybe, just maybe with this book, you might have been re-educating people who might have been influenced by another book written more than 40 years ago by Canadian author Farley Mowat called A Whale for the Killing, in which he tells the story of a trapped whale near Burgeo that he says he tried to rescue, but the local people wanted to kill it for sport. Do you think maybe, even though this wouldn't have been in your mind perhaps, but is it important, do you think, to balance out the impression some people might have of Newfoundlanders with your tale of the desperate effort by townspeople to save a dolphin?
Unfortunately, cruelty can be found anywhere in the world in all societies. Unfortunately, it sometimes does happen. And I don't exactly know what happened in this situation with Farley Mowat's book. And as you said, I was not thinking of that when I read the book. It was purely a nice story that I was trying to write. But I think Dolly's rescue is more representative of how most people in Newfoundland would react to a creature in distress. Yes. Or at least I would like to think that is the case.
Yeah, I think you just might be right. You are a proud and passionate Newfoundlander for sure. Maybe not altogether surprising then that your favorite song is the Ode to Newfoundland. We're going to have a listen to a beautiful version of the ode recorded in the 80s, and then we're going to find out why you love it so much. So let's have a listen to the Ode to Newfoundland as recorded by Vonnie Barron and Esther Squires.
When sun rays crown thy pine-clad hills, and summer spreads her hand, when silvern voices tune thy rills, we love thee, smiling land. We love thee, we love thee, we love thee, smiling land. When spreads thy cloak of shimmering white at winter's stern command, through shortened day and starlit night, we love thee, frozen land. We love thee, we love thee, we love thee, frozen land. When blinding storm gusts fret thy shore, and wild waves lash thy strand, through spindrift swirl and tempest roar, we love thee, wind-swept land. We love thee, we love thee, we love thee, wind-swept land. As loved our fathers, so we love. Where once they stood, we stand. Their prayers we raise to heaven above. God guard thee, Newfoundland. God guard thee,
And that was, of course, our beautiful Ode to Newfoundland, sung by Vonnie Barron and Esther Squires, accompanied by Sandy Morris on guitar and the incredible saxophone of Rick Hollett. It's a request of my guest today, Newfoundland children's author Luanne Langdon. Luanne, why do you love the Ode so much?
Well, there are several reasons. I'll start, first of all, with the melody. I think it's a beautiful, simple melody. It's one that anyone can sing. Polished choirs can sing it at special formal events, and it sounds absolutely wonderful. And I can sing it when I'm out walking the coastal shore, sing it to myself and to the wind. It's just a beautiful anthem, a beautiful hymn-like anthem that is very appealing to me. Secondly, I absolutely love the lyrics. They're meaningful. I love the descriptive language. The rich vocabulary. In a lot of cases, there's Old English words and phrases that evokes deep feeling for this beautifully wild place. Yeah. I'm thinking specifically of the phrases such as spreads the cloak of shimmering white, the wild waves lashing the strand, spindrift swirled, wild waves, silvern voices tune thy rills. For a long time, I had no idea what that meant, but I loved it. And all 4 verses are absolutely full of images that I find very appealing. They describe not only the scenery, the beautiful scenery and the landscapes, but the seasons, even the weather.
That's which we're obsessed with.
Yes, which a lot of people do not like. I personally love our weather. And the 4th verse goes into our history, which is so important.
Lots of reasons.
There is. And beside that, as I said, I love the ode. I love to hear it. I love to sing it. Like even to myself, I love to sing it in big congregational settings. And I love the fact that it ends with a prayer. I think that's a very positive element. I don't consider the lyrics problematic or dated or inappropriate at all. I think it's a very special part of our heritage and sets us apart as a cultural group.
Well, listen, I agree. And you and I share a love for the ode. And maybe it's fitting to hear it again around Valentine's Day, given this is February, as it's literally poetry set to music. A love poem, I think, written by Sir Cavendish Boyle, of course, an early governor, who spent only a couple of years here, but clearly fell in love with the place. But of course, with some of those lyrics, he was under no illusions about how difficult life could be here. And the 2nd verse speaks of wild waves lashing our strands, as you mentioned, and storm gusts. Which kind of brings me to your 2nd book. It was about a storm and a dramatic rescue at sea with the help of the lighthouse at Portagrave. So briefly, tell me what's the story of your 2nd book?
The Two Lights. It tells the story of a rescue that happened in the 1930s in the small hamlet of Hipshold, as it was known back then, at the very end of Portagrave, right at the very tip of the peninsula. And it describes how a small schooner went aground on its way headed into Bay Roberts with some cargo. It was a very stormy November gale. The crew managed to get the ship around the point of land known as Green Point, which separates Portagrave from Bay Roberts. They did that by way of the light from Green Point, the lighthouse light that was shining, that enabled them to avoid the treacherous rocks that were right on the point. Okay. So because of that lighthouse, they managed to bring their ship safely to a beach. And then they climbed up the hill, went across the headland in the nighttime. And as they went across the headland, they saw another light. And they went towards that light, down another hill into a little cove in the midst of this wild storm. And the light brought them to a door, which was the house of the fisherman described in the story.
Oh, wow.
And you have to read the story to find out who the fisherman was.
Well, I'm sure people are going to want to read it now. And I think you have a little bit of a personal connection to the story?
I do. The story was told to me, actually, it wasn't actually told to me. I read it in my mother's journal. She wrote about it in a special book that she started on her 70th birthday. My eldest sister, gave her a writing kit. Each day you wrote about something in your past. And one of the questions was, what is something that happened in your hometown or in your neighborhood that you remember as a child, something significant? And she wrote about this shipwreck. She would have been 8 or 9 at the time.
Is that right?
Yes. And so that's where I first read it. then. And when I read it, I thought that would make a wonderful story. And the story is actually about my grandparents.
So they were actually on the boat? They were part of the crew, or were they part of the rescue people?
They were the house.
Oh, okay.
The house at the top of Kennedy's Gulch was my grandparents' house. They were the ones that took in the seamen.
Wow. Oh. And your mother was from Portagrave. She was a Kennedy
Yes.
from Portagrave. She was a teacher like yourself.
Yes.
And you told me that she had a wonderful sense of humor and could tell a great story.
She did. She was very funny. She was a good imitator. And in our family, we often joke that Mom could tell Dad stories better than he could because she had a great sense of humor and she had a wonderful memory. She could remember things, which she actually inherited from her father because he was a good storyteller too and could recite poems and passages of scriptures and things that he had learned from the royal readers when he was in school. Yeah, she was funny and she could tell tales really well.
Speaking of funny stories, I think your mom would probably enjoy the next song that we're going to hear. The other kind of local songs that you like are ballads that tell a good story, especially when there's a bit of fun involved. For your second song, you've requested a Newfoundland classic, the Kelligrew Soiree, as sung by the Celtic Connection. Very briefly, why does that one tickle your fancy?
Number one, it's a catchy tune. And I love the soft, lilting Irish voices that I've usually heard sing it. Secondly, the lyrics are just plain funny.
Well, you can understand them.
Well, there was a few words I recognized. Most, I had no idea what was going on. But I recognized the line about, here comes the local preacher with the pulpit on his head. I did recognize that, but I couldn't quite visualize it.
Your father being a minister. Yeah,
Yes.
you'd never seen him with a pulpit on his head.
No,
Well,
no.
look, let's have a listen to it. And I think the Celtic Connection will probably sing it in a way that we'll get most of the words. So let's have a listen.
You may talk of Clara Nolan's ball or anything you choose, but it couldn't hold a snuff box to the spree and Kelligrews. If you want your eyeball straightened, just come out this week with me, and you'll have to wear your glasses at the Kelligrew Soiree. There was birch rind, tart wine, cherry wine, and turpentine, jowls and cavalances, ginger beer and tea. Pig's feet, cat's meat, dumplings boiled up in a sheet, dandelion and cracky seed at the Kelligrew Soiree. Oh, I bore a Clooney's beaver as I squared my yards of sail, and a swallowtail from Hogan that was foxy on the tail. Billy Cuddihy's old working pants and Patsy Nolan shoes, and an old white vest from Fogarty to sport at Kelligrews. There was Dan, Billy, Joe, Lily, Tantan, and Mrs. Tilly, dancing like a little filly, but raise your heart to see. Jim Brine, Dan Ryan, Flipper Smith and Caroline, I tell you boys, we had a time at the Kelligrew Soiree.
Oh, when I arrived at Betsy Slips at night at 8:30, the place was blocked and carriages stood waiting at the gate. With Clooney fever on me face, the first word Betsy said, here comes a local preacher with the pulpit on his head. There was Bill Hughes, Dan Hughes, Wilson Taft and Teddy Roos, but Brian he sat in the blues looking hard at me. Jim Fling, Tom Kings, Johnson champion of the ring, all the boxers I could bring at the Kelligrew Soiree.
The Saratoga Lancers first Miss Betsy kindly said, sure dance with Nancy Cronin and her granny on the head. Hogan danced with Betsy, oh you should have seen his shoes as he lashed old muskets from the rack that night in Kelligrews. There was boiled guineas, cold guineas, bullocks' heads and pickaninnies, everything that catch the pennies to break your sides of sea. Boiled duff, cold duff, apple jam was in a cup. I'll tell you boys, we had enough at the Kelligrew Soiree. Crooked Flavin struck the fiddler and the hand I then took in. You should see George Clooney's beaver and it flattened to the rim. Oh, Hogan's coat was like a vest, the tails were gone, you see. Us as I, the Devil Holly, and your Kelligrew Soiree. There was birch rind, tart wine, cherry wine, and turpentine, jowls and cavalances, ginger beer and tea. Pig's feet, cat's meat, dumplings boiled up in a sheet. Tell you boys we had a time at the Kelligrew Soiree. Tell you boys we had a time at the Kelligrew Soiree. Tell you boys we had a time at the Kelligrew Soiree.
And that was the Kelligrew Soiree by the Celtic Connection, and a favorite of my guest today, children's author Luanne Langdon. Well, Luanne, we just heard about your mother's influence as a teacher and a funny storyteller. Your father was a clergyman, as you mentioned, and I'm thinking that spiritual influence might have played a role in your third book, released just before Christmas. You move from the sea to the sky in He Calls Them by Name. What is that about?
That book is a child's musings about the universe. And it's, while not based on an actual true event as such, it is based on my memories as a child. I've always been interested in science and in nature. As I mentioned earlier, the land and the sea has always been of great interest to me, which is part of the reason why I love to live here in Newfoundland. But the sky has always been of great interest. And my father was, as you mentioned, a great influence in my life. I remember many times asking him questions about life in general, and sometimes he could answer them, and he would when he tried. Other times he would tell me to ask my mother. But this story talks about a little girl looking up at the sky at night and wondering about the universe, about God, about who is out there, about time, what happens after time, those kinds of very deep, profound questions. And I remember as a child 2 particular assignments that I had in school that kind of prompted these questions. School was very important to me also. I absolutely loved school. And for the first part of my life, my schooling was in small, rural, multi-grade classrooms, which were wonderful. And I remember in elementary school having an assignment in the middle of winter one time where we had to go out and look at the night sky for a week and find the Dipper and the North Star and plot where they were and make observations. And then at the end of the week, we would give our little report. At the time, we were living in a little small community in Newfoundland where it was no trouble to see the stars. Yeah. It wasn't on the Avalon Peninsula, actually. So it was absolutely beautiful. And I remember that's where it kind of started, the idea, the seed for that particular story. And then later in high school, we had to do this. We were doing a unit on space. And again, we had to go and observe the night sky for about a week. Now, the questions were a little higher level thinking. But it was the same kind of thing. And then when the pandemic struck, I spent a lot of time outside because we were advised to do that.
That's right.
And the nugget for this idea came to me when I was actually looking at the stars. And I can see them actually where I live.
Yeah.
But
and he calls them by name.
Yes.
Again, is based on a verse of scripture.
it is. It's talking about how God names the stars. He created the stars. He names them and he calls them by name. And I always found that to be absolutely amazing. Actually, to get back to my father again, I distinctly remember asking him how far away the stars were and what was after stars, beyond them.
Big questions for little readers, and big concepts. Is there a knack for communicating concepts like where do I fit in the universe to children? Is there a special way to introduce them to life's important questions?
Well, I think as a teacher of primary children, the best way is through stories and letting them hear not concepts directly, but in sort of through story. Yes, through the illustration of a story.
Yeah, that's right.
That it would come across, not through directly teaching them as in a science lesson as such.
And asking them to look at the sky and that sort of thing.
Observation.
That's right. Well, a Newfoundland or Labrador sky, the mighty North Atlantic Ocean all around us, simultaneously magnificent and unforgiving at times, the ocean. There's no shortage of inspiration for a writer in this place. And we have a strong belief, and I'm one of those people, that this is quite possibly the most special place on Earth. So are we a bit biased or downright delusional when we think we're special, or this place is special?
I think we are special, yes. We have a vast collection of stories, both oral and written. Our music, our art, crafts, and the dialects all point to things that make us unique. And as I talked about when I was telling why I love the ode, we have an anthem that describes just how special we are.
And a dictionary.
Yes, and a dictionary, which I had to use to look up some of the words in Kelligrew Soiree
Well, there you
to
go.
find out what they meant.
It all fits in. It all ties together. So we've just got a couple of minutes left, but is it fair to assume there are more books on the horizon, more stories to be told from this wonderful place?
I have written other stories. They have not yet actually come to light, but actually before the Dolly one came out, I had already written some animal stories. And I'm currently working on 2 others at the moment.
Can you give any hints at all as to what? Are they still children's books?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the 2 that I'm thinking of right now are about Newfoundland culture.
Based on real events?
Yes,
Yeah?
as a matter of fact.
Real place, of course, but
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So
yes.
real. You can see that I'm trying to pull it out of you, but I understand that if they're still in progress,
Yes, that's right.
yes, yeah.
Well, I'm hoping one will be published within the year, maybe towards the end of the year. That's my hope.
I mean, this place is full of writers, and writing, as did all the arts, exploded, probably back in the 70s and 80s. Do you think of yourself now as taking your place in that group of writers here?
Well, I'd never ever aimed to do that. Like, this is something that just sort of I fell into.
Yes.
So I don't consider myself to be on the same level as Newfoundland writers. This is just sort of and after
your professional career teaching, it's something that
yes,
you
that I like to do, that I just have stories in me, and I just like to write them, whether anybody wants to read them or not.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people like to read them. Just so you know, a writer is a person who writes stories that people will then buy and read. So I think you probably can consider yourself taking your place among the writers of this province and adding to the canon of stories, you know?
Okay, yes.
That's a pretty exciting thing.
It is, yes.
Especially if you hadn't planned on it.
No, it's a bonus.
Sometimes those things that are unexpected turn out to be pretty wonderful, don't they?
Yes, that's true.
Well, you may be new to the writing game, but as I say, you are adding a strong voice to the canon of stories, about this place and from this place. And you're speaking directly to the next generation of those who call this place home. So I'm really curious, what keeps Luanne Langdon going strong? The writer, but also the person?
Well, I sometimes wonder if I am going strong, but the fact that I'm still here after so many years is a good thing. So I would have to say my fans and my followers, but I don't actually have any. So
But you can name maybe right now, although, I'm sure you could name a few. I can.
So I will say what keeps me going strong is my family, both past and present, my friends, and my faith.
If there was ever a time, I think, when we needed all of those things, it's now, isn't it?
Well, I would say that they keep me grounded. My family has always supported me through all my endeavors and been with me through all the challenges of my life. I have a wonderfully rich Christian heritage, which I'm so thankful for. I have wonderful friends who are great companions and encouragement through all the storms and the good times in life. And of course, my faith gives me strength for today and hope for the future.
Beautifully said. You must be a writer. Well, that is going strong for this week. And thank you so much, Luanne, for being here and telling us a bit about your books and yourself.
Thank you for the invitation.
And my name is Deborah Collins, and I'm inviting you to join us again next Tuesday at 7:30 right here on VOWR.